Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media Summit. My name is Jess and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information to cover with you all. Now let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. If you haven't already said hi, there is a whole giant, awesome community of people out there. So reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Also keep in mind, if you have any tech issues today, a browser refresh is probably going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's summit, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over live chat, we also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentation. And if we do not get to your question during the webinar, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us today will be following up with you after we wrap. All right, next up, there are going to be lots of cool aha brain light up moments on the summit today. And if you want to share those with your community, we love that. We've made it nice and easy. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's summit will automatically be added to your post. And our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection of solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go and explore. And if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout the summit today. Now, I will tell you a little bit more about those later on. But a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be in attendance during the live webinar in order to qualify to win. And we will follow up with all winners after we wrap the summit today. Now, all of our winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, you can find the full T's and C's in that Handouts tab. Again, just click on the Handouts tab, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all of your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much, we have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. In today's summit, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. The expert speakers and teams will be reviewing all the questions asked after the webinar, which means even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. And if you are a lucky winner here today and you'd like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we will get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have all of you here live with us at the summit today, and we want to keep that good feeling going. So let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter, LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. And if you're looking for more awesome resources and content right after we wrap the summit today, make sure you subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in that Handouts tab, and you will be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar as well. Both you and your coworker could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend, because it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link back in that Handouts tab and fill out the application. The Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you can choose to join in, like surveys, test running new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, chat with great people, and learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply or send the link to a decision maker in your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my all-time favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need all in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. Okay, I have one more exciting resource that I have to tell you all about today. That is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. This is going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and again, completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in the handouts tab as well. Okay, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited and ready to dive in, so let's get going.
Okay, thanks for that overview, Jess. And today we have a bunch of great sessions on streamlining, securing, and protecting cloud, IT, and business operations. I want to say a big thank you for joining us. On the virtual summit today, we've got some of the most innovative leading companies in the industry. You'll be hearing from experts at Zerto, Rubrik, Census, and Tanium. That's a lot of different sessions full of innovative solutions, hot trends, and creative strategies all in one place. Now, as Jess mentioned, we do have some awesome prizes lined up for you. So let me walk you through our incredible lineup of prizes. We're going to be giving away 2 Apple iPhone 14 Plus phones in your choice of color at 128 gig model. We've got 2 Apple Watch Ultras. And then we've got 3 Microsoft Surface Pro 9s, also 128 gig models. And as always, every 30 minutes on a summit, we're giving away a $300 Amazon gift card. And remember also that during each session, we'll be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card for the best question asked during that session. So the teams will review all the questions asked after the event, which means even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there's still a chance to win. So now I guess I should tell you who I am. My name is Scott Becker. I'm one of your 3 moderators for today's summit. You heard from Jess already. Now as we're getting started, I'm going to turn things over to Keith Ward, who's going to kick us off with a keynote interview with a special guest that should give us a great framework for this event.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am here today with Dan Sullivan, a true expert. Dan is a data architect, a data engineer, cloud architect. He does all kinds of stuff. In addition to all his technical chops in working in the field, he also writes books and articles, and occasionally he even talks to us. So Dan, welcome. Glad to have you here today.
Thanks, Keith. It's great to be here again.
Always a pleasure. Okay, so let's dive right in. Now, the topic of streamlining, securing, and protecting cloud, IT, and business operations is, of course, too large a topic to really cover in the few minutes we have here and to go into really any depth. So what I wanted to do right now is focus on a few of the particulars. You ready?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So what would you say are some of the key considerations for streamlining cloud operations? To me, that kind of means how do you increase your efficiency, keep costs under control, and do what you need to do with often fewer resources and less budget?
Yeah. Well, I'd say there's probably 3 things that are really fundamental, especially when you're migrating to the cloud and working in the cloud, and sort of from the easiest to implement is just a relatively simple practice of doing things like tagging or labeling your resources with like a contact in the organization and a budget or some kind of organizational identifier, because people need to be able to quickly identify what resources they have. Like I've been doing this for years and I still can lose track of stuff that I might have created last week. And so being able to efficiently identify what resources I have out running on the cloud is really important, both from a cost perspective and a security perspective. I'd say another sort of streamlining efficiency sort of practice that we want to take to adopt whenever we can is using automation as much as possible. So treating infrastructure as code. So that way, for example, we can configure our infrastructure and be sure that next time we roll it out, it's rolled out the same way. Also, you want to look at things like auto-scaling capabilities. That's especially important if you have varying workloads. So, for example, if during normal business hours in your region, you're going to need more virtual machines or more resources or nodes in your cluster, then they can be auto-scaling. And then when you don't need them, they scale down. And again, the automation will do sort of the easy work for us that we can easily forget, especially as we get busier and busier and try and do more things with fewer people. And then finally, more from an architecture perspective, I'm really an advocate for looking at services and serverless capabilities as much as possible. The fewer pieces of infrastructure we have to manage, the better, both from a security and potentially from a cost perspective. So those I would say, would be three things that I would immediately look at.
Got you. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now, you mentioned security, so we're going to talk about that next. We all know the security is getting harder and harder to do these days. Back in the Jurassic era, you had a walled off data center, right? You had a garden. You had one place pretty much where everything was. You had to turn on firewalls. You had to watch a few ports, and then you were done. Well, it's not really that simple anymore. That's not breaking news. But given that reality that we face now, some of which you were discussing, what are some of the main factors of concern to organizations in the current day where everything is available pretty much everywhere, and you've got more people with access to your network than we've ever had before?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think you make a really good point. The way things used to work with this kind of moat idea, and we were walled off in a walled off garden, that's completely gone. Like it just doesn't exist. And we exist in a world with cloud computing, hybrid computing, bring your own devices, mobile devices. So a model that's emerging in security is something called zero trust. And here the idea is we're going to forget about the idea that, oh, this is an IP address from my internal network. I can trust whatever's going on or whatever's being asked for by this client. No, we don't. With zero trust, we literally verify or authenticate every transaction. If I make an API call, then, for example, my service isn't going to assume because I'm an employee or I'm on a company-owned device that it's a legitimate request. No, I need to be validated using various protocols like, is the device locked down sufficiently? Am I expected to be making these kind of requests at this time of day? And so there are a lot of factors that come in when we think about, should I trust a request for some access or to do some operation? The zero trust model has been adopted by a lot of vendors and security practitioners, and it's in the U.S. National Institute for Standards and Technology has a great write-up on zero trust, which I would recommend. But basically, the idea is you want to have security tools, and this may involve like a security partner who can help you implement zero trust, because you want to open up your services. Like that's how we do so much work right now, is working collaboratively with business partners, and also our customers come into our services. So we don't want to lock things down. That model doesn't work from a business perspective or from a security perspective. But really focusing on zero trust and just understanding that we are vulnerable. Like if the bad actors want to come after us, they can do it. They have automated tools, they have the time, they have the expertise. We can't hide, and none of us is too small. And if you're big, you're probably already, been a target multiple times. So I think it's like living in an environment where this is just pervasive, and we have to assume that we are going to be the subject of malicious attacks at some point, and think about how we're going to recover from that and how we're going to mitigate the risks of those.
Right. And along those same lines, though, even with zero trust, the bad guys can still get to you. It's so hard to lock everything down. One small vulnerability, an unpatched server, whatever it is, and the bad guys are inside, right? So
Yes.
Along with zero trust, it probably makes sense for organizations to have the ability to recover and to bounce back, and to not have an intrusion sort of wreck the company. What we're really talking about here at this point is resiliency, aren't we? I mean, is that something that is necessary even in the era of zero trust?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I'm really glad you asked that question because zero trust is sort of like one side of the equation where this is how we behave to mitigate the risks. But there will always be, someone like who may, sorry, let's try that one again. you know, there's always the risk that there's someone out there, whether it's a nation state actor or someone else who has a sufficient interest in whatever it is you have that they will attack your organization. So it's great to have zero trust, but we also need to function under the assumption that we will have a, really kind of a catastrophic loss at some point, like from a security perspective. That's a way of thinking about this because if we are one of those unlucky organizations or individuals who say is a victim of a ransomware attack or is somehow otherwise compromised, the question isn't so much, how do we stop the attack? It's how do we recover from the damage that has been done? And no matter how much we think about different ways we could be attacked and try and control for those, there are just too many ways that things can go wrong, and we may need to recover from a catastrophic situation. So having things like backups that are air gapped, so if we are the victim of, say, for example, a ransomware attack, we can at least recover our data, at least to some point in time. So when we're thinking about like recovery and resiliency, we want to think in terms of how long would it take us to recover? So, for example, if we're a hospital and we were attacked by a ransomware attack, we might have a very short window that we feel like we can recover. So we want to think about in terms of time it takes us to recover. And then we also want to think in terms of what point do we want to be able to recover to? Do we want to be able to recover to yesterday, last week, 10 minutes ago? And depending on how much time, essentially, how much work can we lose, that will influence what we call our recovery point objective, or how much, where do we want to recover to? So I would think we definitely want to keep those, both the recovery time objective, recovery point objective in mind. And just, again, assume for the purposes of resiliency that we will have some kind of catastrophic loss and we're going to need to be able to recover from that. And I would say,
Absolutely. So, yeah, in other words, what we're saying is assume a worst case scenario, not a best case, right? And that will change the mindset that you need to have, to make sure that you are protected, you're secure, and if the worst happens, that you're going to be able to recover your business. I mean, it can be that catastrophic, as we all know. Dan Sullivan, we've talked about a lot and a little. As usual, you've covered a great amount of territory in a brief time, and it was a pleasure, as it always is, to talk with you.
thanks, Keith. I enjoyed it again.
Okay, Keith and Dan, thanks so much for that enlightening discussion that really frames up some of the issues that we'll be hearing about throughout the day. And before we get into our first session of the day, we have a quick poll question for everybody. What is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? Are you looking at doing it in the next 6 months? Is it 6 months to a year? Is it 1 to 2 years? Or are you not sure? So we'll just leave that poll question up there for a minute here, just to give everybody an opportunity to answer that. We've got the answers flooding in. Appreciate everybody who has responded so far. And I won't be displaying this one. This is just for our interest, but just to let you know, we're at about the not shores are leading the pack, and then we've got the 6 to 12 months coming up second, and so we'll just leave that there for another couple of moments. All right. Well, thanks everybody for answering that. We do really appreciate it. So let's get rolling with our sessions. And it's time for our first presentation in the Streamlining, Securing, and Protecting Cloud IT and Business Operations Virtual Summit. This session comes from Zerto, and presenting for Zerto are Sarah Daugherty and Anthony Dutra from Zerto. So Sarah's a product marketing manager, and Anthony is a technical marketing engineer, and I'm going to turn things over to Sarah to get us started.
Thank you for your time today. My name is Sarah Daugherty. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at Zerto. During our time together today, I'd like to talk to you about how Zerto can help you achieve an uninterrupted business. We're going to cover a few things today, starting with who is Zerto. Then we're going to discuss some customer challenges, talk about the Zerto difference, and I'd also like to highlight some things about the new Zerto 10. We'll go into a summary, and then we'll finish with Q&A. Who is Zerto and what do we do? There's going to be a theme through these slides today that I want to point out in the very beginning here. We provide continuous availability by protecting, recovering, and moving data and applications across on-premises, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments. For some background on Zerto, we've been building a global business since 2009 with over 2,000 partners, including strategic partnerships and alliances. We became part of HPE in 2021 with full support to grow our business with more resources and a large sales team. We currently serve over 9,500 customers across all industries in over 100 countries. This is just a sample of our customer base from large to mid-size and small enterprise across all industries. And the key here is they were all looking for the same thing. They all had the need to run an uninterrupted business, which is what Zerto was able to help them do. We continually talk with customers as well as watch what is happening in the marketplace. And these are a few of top customer challenges that we're going to cover. We start with cyber threats. The continued threat of ransomware, which has become a C-level priority for all organizations. And you don't wonder why when you look at $265 billion in estimated cost of ransomware by 2031. Disruptions. To succeed, downtime from any disruption, whether natural disaster or through human error, is unacceptable. 93% of organizations have suffered a data-related disruption in the last 12 months. That number is definitely unacceptable and something that we don't want to deal with. Lastly, cloud complexity. The acceleration of cloud adoption of hybrid and multi-cloud has introduced new complexity for IT. It's something we need to get a handle on and understand a lot better, because if you look at the number there, 100 zettabytes of cloud data by 2025. That number is staggering, and it's something we need to pay attention to. The bottom line is everybody wants 24/7 availability with no downtime and no data loss. This is where Zerto can help address these challenges. For over a decade, we have led the market with continuous data protection, also known as CDP. Again, I want to point out, we talked about the theme that's recurring through these slides and through my presentation, is that we protect, recover, and move data and applications for continuous availability across on-premises, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments. We can help tackle the challenges that are encountered across all platforms while focusing on three key focus areas: ransomware resilience, disaster recovery, and multi-cloud mobility. How do we do it? There are four main areas that allow your business to always be on. We start with continuous data protection, orchestration and automation, multi-cloud, and simplicity at scale. All these pieces put together will help us to help you have an uninterrupted business. Let's start with continuous data protection, also known again as CDP. It's made possible with Zerto's block level replication, near synchronous replication, which is the best of both synchronous and asynchronous approaches. Because we sit at the hypervisor level, we can be a fully software-only solution that is totally independent of the underlying hardware and infrastructure, including storage. We work well across hypervisors, clouds, and platforms, all in the background without impacting production. The continuous work that we talk about with CDP is happening in the background, which means it's completely hands-off for you. There's no dealing with backup windows or creating schedules, no managing snapshots or dealing with agents. You simply set it up, replicate, and it stays always on to keep you up and running always. Part of what makes CDP with Zerto so powerful is our unique journaling capabilities. The Zerto journal tracks every single change made in your application or on your server, and it logs these as checkpoints every 5 or 10 seconds. I'm going to repeat that because that's really important, 5 or 10 seconds, even when you have hundreds or thousands of servers. It can store the change data for 1 hour up to 30 days, and it offers you unmatched granularity when it comes to recovery. Whenever needed, you simply rewind to an old checkpoint and easily recover from that exact point in time. As we all know, legacy data protection has made it difficult for IT teams like yours by offering restore points from very inconsistent points in time, which extends RTO and obviously complicates recovery. Zerto, on the other hand, solves for the challenge of recovering complex enterprise apps by protecting your workloads as a cohesive, logical entity. This eliminates the inconsistent recovery of multi-VM applications where each VM is being restored to a different point in time. That's not something you want. And this is more than just bundling VMs together as a group to help with management. With Zerto, when creating recovery points, all the VMs will share the same validated checkpoint with right order fidelity across all. That's key. What this means is that when the application is recovered, every VM that makes up the application spins up from that same cross-VM recovery point. All these can come up together in the boot order of your choice without any extra work on your part. Application consistency grouping. This allows you to protect and recover complex multi-VM applications together as one unit to the exact same point in time. And I'll repeat that, exact same point in time versus what legacy data protection has always been. All while allowing you to save resources when you're trying to reduce the amount of time dedicated to recovery. The simplified recovery that we've been talking about is powered by a built-in orchestration engine. With Zerto, you simply select the applications or servers you want to recover, pick the exact point in time you need down to the second, and then start the failover, test, or restore process. When there's a disruption or outage, which happens more than we want to admit, this fast recovery is exactly how you can dramatically limit downtime and get back up and running very quickly. This keeps your business running at all times. We pair that orchestration engine with automation, extending from start to finish, top to bottom. We want to eliminate manual processes and allow you to recover quickly. And this happens with auto deploy, auto protect, auto scale, and you can really make Zerto fit your needs precisely with open REST APIs. All of this is designed to maximize your time and help you stay focused on other strategic projects. One way to demonstrate Zerto's orchestration and automation is with failover testing. We all know testing is critical for any business, especially when related to disasters. We want to reduce testing time and the complexity involved, all while still testing often and comprehensively. One example that I want to show on here that we have on this slide is from an insurance company who used to have extensive runbooks and lengthy DR exercises. Now with Zerto, they've reduced that by 98% and taken a complicated 3.5-day process down to only a couple hours. They're just one of many customers who have realized the value every day from our non-disruptive testing and the fast RTOs that we provide. Total flexibility for DR to the cloud of your choice. That's what this is about. Zerto supports private, hybrid, and public clouds such as Azure or AWS, 350 plus managed service provider partners, or public cloud with the Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud, or IBM Cloud. Zerto's multi-cloud agility locks DR to, from, and between any of the listed cloud environments, and simply add new cloud targets as your cloud strategy changes and evolves. We can grow with you and make changes as needed. When we talk about multi-cloud, use cases, whether they're IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, instantly become available. DR to the cloud, for example, is a great way to get an offsite target and kickstart a cloud strategy. Once you're using cloud, there might be a need to migrate everything to the cloud, or in some cases, you may even migrate out if your strategy changes. The flexibility is there. We offer DR to or within the cloud, along with cloud migrations, to make things a lot easier for you as you unlock your multi-cloud strategy. Purpose-built for the cloud. We're embracing cloud native. It leverages native cloud services for resource management, auto-scaling, and cost-effective storage, all with limitless burst capacity and no running VMs until needed during failover. Bottom line, we want to be sure that no app goes unprotected. One of the advantages we have when it comes to hybrid cloud is the power of HPE behind us and what you get with HPE GreenLake. It's a highly available software as a service platform that's unlocking data protection as a service across both backup and DR. HPE GreenLake for backup and recovery is available today, and very soon we'll be launching the HPE GreenLake for disaster recovery. So keep looking for more details. For many years, our customers have experienced fast, easy deployments on-prem with Zerto. The focus is on accelerating time to value and eliminating any issues getting your applications protected. We understand the pain points and what you're focused on. For example, if we look at this slide here, we have a biotech customer who was up and replicating 1,500 servers in about 3 weeks, all due to the software-only solution with the ability to rapidly automatically scale out in order to experience low RPOs. If you look at the number on this slide here, the average RPO of 7 seconds in a multi-cloud deployment. That's pretty impressive, and it's something that we want to share with everyone. We provide the ability to get up and running quickly, and then adapt as things change. This is happening thanks to our flexible architectures, which enable a wide range of configurations and deployments. The example I want to highlight here is it's a both local replication and remote replication to a DR site. Plus, there's an additional offsite immutable copies hosted on premises or in the cloud, whichever you choose. You only need a couple Zerto components to deploy this. It is a software only with always-on replication, removing the need for scheduling, agents, and appliances, all with the choice of your storage. You choose your storage. Customers have told us many times, it's as easy as simply point Zerto at the target that you want and click go, and you're off replicating very quickly. Lastly, replication and journaling we've been talking about is easily reported in a variety of ways. Complete multi-site visibility through Zerto Analytics, our SaaS solution that's included at no additional cost. Detailed reporting across all resources and recovery operation allows for the right data to be available when needed, whether it's for compliance, auditing, or even performance analysis. We make it easy and accessible for you whenever you need it for whatever your needs are. We've talked about a lot of technical differentiators, but the bottom line is we focus on what the customer needs. As you can see on this slide, there's a lot of large companies put this to the test every single day with demanding workloads. Zerto is the only company with a CDP solution that can deliver single-digit RPOs across thousands of VMs, across totally disparate infrastructures, requirements, and applications. It is simple CDP at scale with proven reliability and proven performance across many extreme digital environments. All you have to do is look at some of the names on here and understand the large size, their enterprise size, and what we're looking at for RPOs and the number of VMs that they're using. On this slide, you can see some examples of customers who have done just that using Zerto. Helping create uninterrupted business is critical, and they have relied on us in order to do that. We're all aware of what's been going on in the airline industry in the past couple of years, and we've heard about all the issues with operations and tickets, etc. So for example, United uses Zerto to protect their website and app, which is critical to their business. If they go down, it could cost them as much as $1 million an hour. They rely on Zerto 24/7 to give them continuous availability if and when anything disrupts their operations. This is just one example of many positive outcomes our customers, whether large or small, are seeing on a daily basis. We are excited to say we recently launched the new Zerto 10, which has 4 key areas, starting with real-time encryption detection. This detection can help provide an early warning of ransomware attack, as well as zero in on when an attack began so that that data can be recovered to a point seconds before the attack. That's critical. The Cyber Resilience Vault combines an isolated recovery environment or clean room with a locked-down data vault using unique zero-trust architecture. The vault enables physically air-gapped and immutable data copies and secure high-performance hardware. The new Zerto Secure Appliance, Zerto Virtual Manager, ZVM, is a new turnkey Linux-based appliance that deploys quickly and securely as a new pre-hardened virtual appliance. And the last thing that we announced was enhancement with Zerto for Azure. Zerto 10 enhances Microsoft Azure data protection with all new replication architecture for more efficient scale-out protection of up to 5,000 VMs to, from, and within Azure. Why Zerto? Why now? We talked about it. Continuous protection for any app, any cloud, any threat. So in summary, we look at the different ways we do this. We mitigate disruptions by protecting your brand from outages and disruptions. We neutralize ransomware threats by recovering in minutes to seconds before an attack. We can modernize your infrastructure. Zerto can remove complexity to support disparate infrastructures and capitalize on new technologies. We unlock multi-cloud and hybrid cloud to drive digital transformation with cross-platform protection for IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. We simplify migrations as well by reducing resources and speeding up consolidations with no hassle cross-cloud mobility. And lastly, it's all about improving operational efficiency with automated orchestration and simplicity to streamline IT operations. I've covered a lot of what's new and what's great about Zerto. We want you to experience Zerto firsthand, so I encourage you to explore Zerto and see what you can learn yourself. We've got the Zerto 10. You can go out and get some more information on that. We have hands-on labs. We have Zerto free trial. Get a demo or try Zerto for 14 days on your own infrastructure. And lastly, hear from your peers, hear from customers, hear from industry experts. But we want you to get the full story.
All right, whoops, I went a little too far there, but we do have a poll up here for additional information that you'd like about the Zerto solution. But great presentation, Sarah. Are you and Anthony ready for some questions?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, super. So let's see. The first one we had a couple that came in from, well, let me ask a question here from Scott. Does Zerto have an easy to configure GUI, or do you require and recommend professional services for initial configuration builds?
Yeah, so in my opinion, if you're very comfortable with being in a vSphere client, provisioning a virtual machine, then you can pretty much use Zerto on your own without very much skill set. So I feel much of the audience members here today, without professional services, could very much easily deploy Zerto in any of their virtualized environments.
Awesome. Next question here comes from Miles, who's wondering, how does Zerto handle the replication and recovery of large-scale mission-critical applications with high transaction rates, ensuring minimal impact on performance and user experience?
Yeah, so obviously applications that require very high transaction rates, right, might be millisecond differences in between. We do have some settings that might be able to help out with that process, but pretty much from a near second recovery perspective, I think Zerto is as close as you're going to get in terms of being able to recover virtual machines at scale and consistently together without being necessarily like a synchronous streaming process. So it can help out in a little bit different manner, still keep you operationally efficient and up and running, but maybe not necessarily down to the millisecond.
Okay. All right, super. Looks like Donald is looking to get under the covers a little bit. He's wondering if you can provide some insights into the underlying architecture and technologies that you guys use to enable near zero RPO and RTO.
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much whatever platform we are living on. So I think Sarah did a good case in terms of our, pretty much tried and traditional on-premise replication. So basically we are using just VMs as well as whatever is natively available, on the hypervisor today, with some of our own proprietary software in there, like the journal, in order to track the changes that Zerto sees within your vCenter environment, and wherever you're replicating to. So yeah, basically Zerto allows, and natively uses wherever it's replicating with, and uses things like the journal, our proprietary near synchronous replication, and how we sort of group those VMs together to create what you see in front of you today.
Okay, fantastic. We had a couple of sort of architectural questions, or at least, where it deploys. So Keith is wondering, are you able to deploy Zerto as a virtual appliance without the need for a Windows server? I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how it's...
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We actually moved away from the Windows server itself. Right now, Zerto 10 and beyond will be strictly a Linux appliance. So if we have a very it'll be a file that you download, spin up within your vCenter environment, and with pretty much low overhead, you can put it on your cluster without sort of any disruption to that. So the GUI itself is a VM, and then on each of your ESXi hosts, you'll have what is called Virtual Recovery Appliance, or VRA, and those are kind of the workhorses that are doing much of the granular level replication on the back end, and everything's managed through the ZVM or the GUI that I mentioned previously. So, non-interruptive to your environment. You can protect it with itself in case something goes down. So it's very versatile and easy to spin up, and we've moved away from, as he's mentioned, the Windows appliance to a new security-hardened Linux one.
Fantastic. Okay. Hey, well, thanks so much for sort of this lightning round of questions. We just have a flood of questions coming in from the audience, and unfortunately, we don't have much more time. I hope you guys can hang out in the chat for a little bit and maybe hit some of those questions there. But thanks so much for being on. And Sarah, I know you talked about you showed the QR code, but any final tips for people who want to get started with Zerto?
Actually, I think we've made it pretty easy. The QR codes are there. Head out to Zerto.com and you can find any information out there, as well as, take a test drive of our product.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you both for presenting today, for all your insights. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank
you.
Okay. And now it's time for our first prize drawing of the day. The winner of our first $300 Amazon gift card is Bridget Gibson of Missouri. So congratulations to Bridget Gibson. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. And stay tuned, because we have a lot of great grand prizes coming up, as well as additional Amazon $300 gift cards. Plus, don't forget, we've got $50 best question prizes for each of our sessions today. So keep those questions coming. And now it is time for the next presentation in the virtual summit. And this session comes from Zubin Talavia of Rubrik. He's an advisory sales engineer. Zubin, welcome. Take it away.
Hello, I am Zubin Talavia, advisory systems engineer at Rubrik. In the next 15-20 minutes, I'm going to kind of discuss a topic that might be near and dear to someone's heart. It's the critical factors in cloud data management and how Rubrik can address those factors and help companies and customers on their way. So let's talk about some of the data and growth challenges and trends that we see today. Enterprises want real-time, consistent, connected, and trusted data to support their critical business operations. Any delay in the availability of data has a negative impact on the businesses, right? So data is expanding all the time. Since in 2022, the growth in data was about 3 times higher than in 2021. And there are new governance requirements, new laws that are put in place. And as companies and customers move to a multi-cloud environment, which is what the trend is, there are little silos of data across different clouds and then on premises. And all this can cause enterprises to slow down on their data strategy and create business challenges. So storage and protection systems remain very critical in managing IT infrastructure. So some of the factors to consider when it comes to data storage and management, whether it's on-premises or cloud, are listed here below, right? So security. Data security is a critical concern for any organization. Both on-premises and cloud data storage solutions, they should have like robust security measures in place so that the data is protected from unauthorized access, breaches, or other security threats. Compliance is the other piece that must be also considered here, right? Many organizations must adhere to specific regulatory requirements when it comes to data storage and management. It's also important to ensure that any solution that is used is compliant with those regulations. Let's talk a little bit about reliability, right? Data must be accessible and available when needed. It doesn't matter whether it's on-prem, whether it's in the cloud. It must have reliable backup and DR processes in place to ensure that data is recoverable in case of an outage or other disruption. Cost is obviously an important factor in today's economy. So the cost of storing and managing data can vary. It can vary between what kind of solutions used, whether it's on-prem or whether it's in the cloud. On-prem requires significant upfront costs for hardware infrastructure, while cloud solutions may require ongoing subscription fees and it's more usage-based. Performance and scalability are the last two factors that must be considered, right? From a scalability perspective, as the amount of data in an organization grows, the solution that you have in place should scale to meet those needs. You think about the fact that the on-premises solutions might require additional hardware infrastructure to accommodate the growth, while cloud solutions can be more scalable, more dynamic, and does not require any physical additional resources on-prem. And then finally, from a performance perspective, we have to also kind of keep in mind that the performance of a data storage and management solution can impact your overall efficiency. So both on-premises and cloud solutions must be able to handle the volume of data being generated and provide fast access times for the authorized users. So it's very difficult to have a grasp of all the data, or the sensitive data, for example, right, that is in the organization and where it is. If you start focusing on data management, you want to know where the data is. So you can kind of either protect it correctly, or you can kind of at least have an idea in case something happens. You know what's on the systems, which can help you with either addressing the media, addressing the public, or even internally getting an idea of what's your risk associated with it. So data is certainly the source of value for your organization. There's no doubt about it, right? That's the new oil, as people call it. Its potential leakage, however, is also a source of risk, regulatory requirements, and commercial sensitivity. In the traditional approach of data risk, of data management access, there are a lot of siloed teams. There's a lot of manual tagging, native auditing, and every month or year there'll be some cleanups of data. This means incomplete or inconsistent classification and access time and money spent on audits instead of higher value work that actually adds revenue to your bottom line. Many data classification tools that are out there require the deployment of additional agents, hardware, so there's an extra headache to manage those systems and agents and the extra security overhead for those agents. So what is needed today is an effective data governance strategy to maximize the value of the data and also to reduce the risk. So how can Rubrik help, right? So Rubrik isn't just a regular backup product, right? Our engineers quickly realized that we could optimize the existing metadata that we back up along with the data. And so you could have an opportunity to do some very cool, exciting things with it. So what we created essentially was a SaaS platform called Rubrik Security Cloud, which I'll kind of demo shortly. That also provides the foundations for some of the other capabilities, right? So for one, you can visualize your instances through our global platform. So whether you're just on-prem, in the cloud, if you're SaaS offerings, you can get visibility into the Rubrik environment from a single location. Two, we then went ahead and developed some ransom investigation, which analyzes your file sets, data, and alerts you to any anomalous behavior that you may have. And then finally, what I'm going to show you and do a little bit more deep dive is the ability to look inside that data and determine what's sensitive among everything you all are backing up, right? So Rubrik sensitive data discovery, it eliminates manual tagging or annual cleanups. We use predefined policies, or you can build your own templates to get automated alerts on violations. Next, it also helps with identify any potential violations of internal compliance policies by basically identifying where the sensitive data is located, who has access to it, without production impact to any of and reduces your risk. Lastly, it also leverages your existing deployments, which helps users to get up and running in just a few minutes with there is little to zero additional infrastructure. Right? So let's kind of quickly see how it works before we jump in the demo. So the first thing you do is you configure a role-based access control to identify user permissions for who has access to that data to view the data. You can also identify the sensitive files with open access in the classification data, right? Next, you create a compliance policy with some predefined or custom templates, which we have provided. And that will specify what protected objects, what type of sensitive information to search for, such as social security numbers, healthcare NPI, credit card information, anything that you wish. Sensitive data discovery then will perform an initial scan and will kind of bubble up any sensitive data that's aligned with those policies that you have chosen. Users can now allow lists with locations where sensitive data information is allowed so that you can minimize, false positives. So you can say, this one is fine, it's okay. So we won't display that again. Finally, we can use agentless technology to do incremental scans, quickly classifying new data that's coming up, and that improves your performance without having, impacting your production, because you have to do rescan of the entire file system again, which could be, lots and lots of files, millions of files, a lot of data. We can kind of search on demand for information at any point in time to satisfy access requests. So, hey, show me all the locations where John Smith's PII is, for example, Once the data scanning is complete, there's no data ever leaves your premises, right? We don't store any data. There's no data that's exfiltrated or gone from a system. Everything remains on premises where the scan is performed. Your information is never accessed by Rubrik or shared by any other customer. And then finally, what we do is if there are any violations that are found, any data that's accessed, everything's logged in the platform. No one can just log in, look at sensitive information without being logged in, right? If there are any violations, we will kind of notify you, and we'll notify you when the sensitive data lives in, like, say, a wrong location that it shouldn't be there. We'll report on policy violations, we'll track compliance progress, and basically help you identify any data that's at risk. So some of the benefits that customers have seen with the sensitive data discovery and data management that Rubrik provides is that it will scan and identify sensitive data without any agents or any impact to production. We leverage the existing SaaS platform UI. We connect to the sensitive data discovery app. There are pre-built policy templates to identify common data types, from standards such as GDPR, CCPA, PCI, HIPAA. And then, or you can also define your own customer dictionaries, expressions, policies. And then we all employ various techniques to minimize, false positives in the environment. So with that, let me kind of switch over to the demo portion, and where we can kind of talk a little bit about, I can show you how this would work. So let's kind of, let me share my screen here. We can quickly go through a demo of the Rubrik Security Cloud and the sensitive data discovery. So this is how Rubrik Security Cloud looks like. We can protect your on-premises cloud as well as any SaaS platforms that you have in a single pane of glass. We talked a little bit about what we do for ransomware monitoring, but our focus is sensitive data discovery, right? So depending on this, so what you have to do is very simple. There is no infrastructure that's needed for this. Everything happens on the backup that is being protected. The first thing you do is you go in, you can assign policies. So if you always define a set of predefined policies like CCPA, HIPAA, USSPII, UKPII, you can create your own policies. But very simple to set this up is you choose the policies that you want to use or you want to scan your backups against. You choose the type of objects that you want to protect it against. So let's say if these are two of my systems that I need to protect or look at, or you can choose a location that you want to target. And then once you have that, you just confirm it. Once you have confirmed once you confirm this, a policy is created, which will basically scan the systems that you select with the policies that you've chosen, and will show that information to you in a dashboard. Now, if there are any open access files with sensitive data, we will quickly bubble that up for you. This is more of a proactive thing for you, where you can kind of go back and kind of make sure that the sensitive files are only accessed by people authorized to see it. If we see any stale sensitive files are files that have not been accessed for over a year. So, but they still contain sensitive data. So we show that to you. And then in general, we'll also show you any sensitive files that we have discovered that contain PII, PCI, HIPAA information, along with the total top risk objects. So you can see over here that the file system, file server, SHO2 has about 41,000 hits of policies that we have basically scanned against. And the policies that are used are what you see here, right? So I can kind of further dig down into this by going into that particular server and viewing a lot more information on where the data is, right? So I can download the CSV for files with hits, or I can kind of look at my Z folder. It's on my file shares, and there are 62 sensitive files, but it's got a lot of hits. So these are only 62 files that have a lot of data in it. Obviously, my HR department has a lot of sensitive files, not surprising. But I've also seen that by my public share, for example, has 38 files that have sensitive data. And as I kind of further dig deep into this, I can kind of see that there are certain users that have certain, like sensitive files, but there's a folder called USPII, and that has 35 sensitive hits in it. Digging into that further, I can kind of see where those files are. Now, I can also click on that file and I can kind of see, okay, it's got HIPAA information in there, and what's permission over here, right? So there's all admin users can do it. Any user in the local system can have full control, and the users group has read and execute permissions. Now, I should wonder, like, why do I need the permissions for this particular file? Is it okay to have it, or should I lock this down even further? And those are questions that we can help you answer. We can also show you details on, when was the file last accessed, when was the file last modified. Just give you an idea of, who's been of the action of forensics more on that file. Any events related to sensitive data are kind of can be visible here. There's an audit log that you can use to kind of track what's going on, and who's created a policy, what do they do, and you can kind of filter by various options on the left. And then we can also show you some reports that you can kind of use for your audit purposes, or even for your internal reporting and management. All the objects that are being protected are kind of listed here. You can kind of use that to kind of give you an idea of which systems are being scanned in your environment, which ones actually are more at risk, and which are the file systems, for example, that you should focus on to improve your security posture, and also like just have a better handle on your data management aspect of it. So finally, in conclusion, just wanted to bring the screen back up to you, give you key highlights, right? Rubrik Security Cloud can help you with your data management of data that's sitting on-prem or in the cloud, right? The way we do this is very low impact because there's no endpoint production systems that are impacted. There's no agents that you have to manage. The solution scales as the data volume grows because we only do incrementals. And finally, we give you the ability to do the sensitive data searches on a more proactive, on a daily basis, so that you can kind of use it for auditing. You can use it for your own internal improvement of a security process, and basically better get a handle of all the data, which is very important to your organization. Okay. Hopefully this 15-20 minutes was well worth your time, and thank you for attending the session.
All right, Zubin, great presentation, great demo. We got some questions here. The first one is how can Rubrik discover my sensitive data?
Yeah, so it's a good question, Scott. So basically what happens is when Rubrik backs up the data, we also look up the metadata. Now we have a SaaS platform called Rubrik Security Cloud that has a feature in it called sensitive data monitoring. Basically what it is that we provide you a set of analyzers and policies such as, for GDPR, HIPAA, PII, PCI, you name it, even for different countries as well. So you can can use some predefined policies, or you can create your own policies and custom analyzers that are specific to your organization. And then because Rubrik is backing up all your systems like your VMs, file systems, NAS, everything else that you have in your environment, you can then choose which systems you want to scan for what policies. And then once you do that, it'll run, once the backup is done, we will basically run a scan of the data that we are protected against those policies, and will show you, hey, like this file system or this server has this file share that we got 1,000 hits of this PII or PCI HIPAA information. So very quickly you can find that needle in the haystack. You can find out where what systems have sensitive data, and where the sensitive data is, and what kind of data it is.
Gotcha. Now, is Rubrik also, in the backup process encrypting that sensitive data?
So we are, when we write the data to Rubrik, it's always encrypted at rest. It's encrypted in flight, it's encrypted while you archive it, it's encrypted while you replicate it, right? So we don't read the data. Rubrik never has access to your data. We don't read it. All the analysis, all that is done on the Rubrik cluster itself, which is local to your environment.
Super, gotcha. Hey, the next question here is a good general question. They're asking, how often do you recommend that we back up our data?
That would be, it depends. Usually customers, do, their backups once a day. Traditionally, what would happen is, they would do a full backup on the weekends, incrementals during the week, because they couldn't scale it any other way. Rubrik follows an incremental forever approach, which means you do a first full and then you do incrementals forever, but we catalog all those as, fulls, so you can go to any point in time and restore the data. So you don't have to worry about that whole incremental and full cycle anymore. My recommendation is that classify your data or your systems, right? Figure out which are the top 5, 10, 15 systems that are absolutely critical to your environment. And maybe do, backups of them twice a week, twice a day, if you want to, right? So maybe every 12 hours. And then for the others, you could do back them up once a day, right? And for some other test and dev, maybe once a week. So it's important to classify your systems. And Rubrik will give you a lot of, options. You could, you can do SQL backups, and you can take transaction log backups every 15 minutes if you wanted to, or not. So we give you a lot of options, and it's up to you and your business case and your SLAs to choose that frequency.
Gotcha. Yeah, the consultant's answer, that it depends, of course, is right, but really appreciate all those rules of thumb there. Those are really useful, I think, for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question: how does Rubrik implement an air gap?
Okay, good question. So Rubrik is, as I mentioned to you, is an immutable file system, and the way we've structured it within the Rubrik, and I think a slide would be better if I had to discuss that, but we have a staging area where all the backups are written to using TLS, through the Rubrik service agent, and they land in that area there. Now, there is we have the Atlas file system where we have an internal process which will then write that data that from the clients to that final resting spot within Rubrik. That piece is logically air gap, which means that we don't expose that to anything. We don't expose it to APIs, CLIs, or to the UI. So there's no way for anyone to mount the file system and access it. So it's logically air gapped from that perspective. Now, if you're talking about physical air gap, we have something called Rubrik Vault, which can also do that, where you can have you have a Rubrik instance, and you can have in a secondary or tertiary data center, you can have another Rubrik instance, and we can control, what ports you want to replicate the data to, when you want to do it. And we only open the ports at that time, so that, at every given time, otherwise the ports, the whole Rubrik system is closed. It's on a separate private network, not accessible to the public internet. And there are different ways to make that physically air gapped if certain customers, certain institutions want that higher level of air gap because of other standards that they may have to adhere to.
All right, Zubin, I appreciate that detail. That's really helpful. And thank you for the question. Zubin, we're about up on time. There's more questions here from the audience, so we'll get those to you for follow-up if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but just kind of a final question. How can people get started with Rubrik?
So please go to visit our website, rubrik.com. There are lots and lots of white papers, there are lots of YouTube videos, demos, and then there is a button there which says, hey, contact me for more information. We can also do a quick demos or online POCs if you have 365 an environment that you want to protect, that's SaaS or any cloud platforms, or you can just reach out to me and I can basically get you in touch with our local account teams who will be happy to set up more deep level discussions with you and your team.
Okay. Well, Zubin, thanks for the overview of Rubrik. Always great to have you on. Really appreciate your time.
Yep. Thank you, Scott, for the opportunity.
And we do have a poll question for you. We appreciate your feedback on additional resources that you'd like to see from Rubrik. I'd also like to remind you about the handouts. We've got a PDF of a nice 7-page white paper that's a Rubrik guide to the public cloud that's there in your handouts section, along with handouts from every participant in this virtual summit. So be sure to check the Rubrik white paper out and all those others if you'd like more detail. And thanks to everybody who's responding to the poll. We appreciate your feedback. I'll just leave it up here while we announce our next group of prize winners. So for our next $300 Amazon gift card, the winner is Christopher D'Amico of Connecticut. And now we're going to do our first batch of grand prizes. We're giving away 2 iPhone 14 Plus phones right now. And our iPhone winners are Adrian Collins from Arkansas and Rakesh Arora from Maryland. So congratulations to Christopher D'Amico, Adrian Collins, and Rakesh Arora. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. Okay, and with that, I'm going to close up that poll. Thanks again to everybody who responded there. And we're going to move on to our next presentation in the Streamlining, Securing, and Protecting Cloud IT and Business Operations Virtual Summit. This one comes from Census, and our speaker is Kevin Garrett. He's a Senior Solutions Engineer. I'm going to turn things over to Kevin.
Thanks, Scott. Happy to be here today and sharing with the Actual Tech audience. It's a pleasure to be back with you and the team. We've done a number of these things in the past, and I'm excited to be here and sharing today. Today is going to be a little bit different in terms of the webinar, in terms of how I've been thinking about this, and now I'm going to be kind of going through this today. Given that the kind of topic of this conversation is centered around continuous improvement, what does that mean for tech teams? What's going on out there in the industry? But then also that, I come from Census, and we have a specific angle in terms of how we think of that and how we do it. It's going to be a little bit of an interesting ride, and I hope that you are a little bit entertained by how I intend to do this and enjoy the ride. So today we're going to talk about basically kind of 3 key things, and then I'm going to pivot this into why Census, how Census, what do we do, and how does that impact these specific items for your organizations. And really, when we're talking about continuous improvement, my main question when I hear this buzzword is, what does that look like? What does it mean? Because a lot of teams and a lot of people and individuals love the idea of continuous improvement, but they don't like the specifics and the nitty-gritty of actually defining that and getting into it, so that we actually know, are we moving the needle or are we not? Number 2 is going to be just building some of those habits, circling back to the foundations, and number 3 is ride the flywheel. So after I get to the end of all of those things, I will circle back to Census, who we are, what we're doing, and then how specifically we tee and dovetail into a lot of these ideas. So what does success look like? When we talk about continuous improvement, that's pretty nebulous. Get better all the time. Awesome. That's a good thing. I don't think anyone would really contest that. But you and your teams are constantly responsible for a vast amount of information. There's a vast amount of information happening more and more these days as things like their LLM models through ChatGPT and Bard are starting to rapidly augment even what attackers can do on the ransomware side of the table. There's any number of sub-disciplines within the overall cybersecurity umbrella, and each of those things interact differently. We have different priorities, we have different needs, but at the end of the day, we all boil up into the same organization. And really, as my friend Doug Brush says, it's about dollars and cents, not bits and bytes. So we're all struggling with some of the same constraints: lack of resources, lack of manpower, lack of funding in a lot of cases, especially given the macroeconomic conditions we are currently facing. So it's really important to come in and set that metric. We have to know where we are, we have to know where we're trying to go, and we have to be able to adjust course as we go. So really, what does that start with? What are some of the very broad and underlying pieces that go into defining that when we're talking about both the macro security organization at large, as well as some of the more micro components of that for individual teams? Well, I think it starts with, I just realized those are all labeled number 1 for some reason when I uploaded my presentation, but an awareness of what's happening in your organization on a predefined basis. And really that boils down to some other players, some other individuals call that visibility. It's one of the angles that we use here at Census. But what's taking place? We can't make changes if we don't know what's going on. If you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to stick to a diet. If you're not kind of having some idea of what goes into your body, odds are good you're not going to see a lot of progress. Same principles apply. And after that, it's a consistent review of lessons learned, trends observed, and really the big boulders that need moving. One of our product guys here uses this reference all the time, where if you show these 3 jars of 3 different size rocks, essentially you have the big rocks, the medium rocks, and the sand, essentially. It doesn't look like all 3 of those things can combine into a single unit in jar, but at the end of the day, they can. If you start with the big ones, then go to the smaller size, and then get to the fine grain stuff later. And really that's what we're trying to do and optimize for all of our teams. So we need to start with the awareness to build a sense of what are those rocks, where in our organization do those fall, what size is this, what's the critical impact? And then at the end of the day, is the needle moving in the direction we need to go? These 3 things are intentionally designed to be very easily parlayed into any subset of the organization, but also not to be overwhelming, because that's really one of the key things that everyone in the security industry in particular is struggling with. Burnout fatigue is real, alert fatigue is real. And at the end of the day, keeping these things general and flexible for your specific organization is one of the ways that we can help the individuals that are contributing to these teams maintain some semblance of a healthy lifestyle. And then also touching on the predefined basis, it doesn't necessarily matter how quickly you're doing this, as long as you're doing it. A lot of organizations rely on, say, like an external pen test on an annual basis, sometimes a quarterly basis. That tends to happen. And that's good. That is a cadence. I would argue, as I will a little bit later on in relation to what we do, that it's not enough, and we can do that on a much more rapid basis. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about these rhythms for your teams, it's up to you to define them and set what that may be, so that we don't cross that threshold into burnout. And building the habits, I'm really big on this. I'm a big book guy. I love all kinds of books and reading materials because at the end of the day, I'm a big old nerd, and it's a lot of fun to go that route. I recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear. This one's great for general kind of just how do we move the needle, both personally and in terms of some of our goals. And then The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is another great one that is a bit more kind of down in the research weeds, understanding a little bit more at the broader sense of why we have habits, like how is that defined? It's really helpful to understand because as we're leading teams, as we're factoring in how these macro pictures work in the micros of our organizations, you might find some pretty wonderful lessons within that. And really the TLDR on that is the micro changes consistently applied equals massive ROI over time. You can think of this as compound interest in the realm of finance, but for personal development or developments of teams. And that is applied across whatever vertical, whatever stack, whatever subset you're looking at. We see these trends play out. Go back to the fundamentals, consistently applied, just like with sports drills. We're hitting on these things over and over and over again until they become second nature. And eventually we really start to see results. And so I think asking every week is a great place to start. What is going to move the needle the most in this coming week? I like to kind of try to think ahead as much as possible. That's always in reference to what's happened before. How's the health of the team and where are we expending the most energy? Because the most energy tends to be some of those big rocks, maybe some of the medium rocks, but that really helps our teams assess where we're at and how to keep moving forward in a productive way. And lastly, ride the flywheel. I joke that are we back in 1800s because no one these days knows really what a flywheel is unless you're into maybe cars or something. I tried to find a picture of the flywheel that powers the London Bridge if you've never seen it, because I love old machinery. It's fantastic. It's beautiful. It's incredibly impressive when you really boil down like the things they were able to do with these massive cast iron things. And what it really sums up to is the flywheel comes from Jim Collins' Good to Great book, another nerdy book resource worth checking out. And that concept is really designed around the idea of once we build momentum, this thing is so heavy, it's so well designed that once we get the momentum going, it's almost impossible to stop. And that's really what we see with this compound interest over time. So now we're going to take some of these concepts and pivot those into what we do at Census and how we see what we are doing specifically impacting these things for security organizations. And that's going to start with some of these statistics. Now, before I kind of touch on the numbers, the core of what we are doing at Census is internet-wide visibility all the time. We scan the entire internet 24/7, 365, and we have the freshest, fastest refresh data and the broadest data set that exists on the planet. We make that available to teams in a variety of ways that I'll touch back on in just a little bit. But these statistics are pretty compelling because this is one of the things that we help organizations with is 37% of organizations, internet-facing vulnerabilities are at least 5 to 10 years old. That to me is mind-blowing. But at the same time, it's not that surprising. If you think about what happened using Log4j back from almost 2 years ago now as an example, that was an example of a small piece of code and software that gained adoption in a larger market. And then many years later, there was a vulnerability discovered, and it happened to be in almost everything or a great deal of what was out there, specifically things that were talking to the internet. And these things happen. That's the nature of a 0 day. It's a previously undisclosed or unknown problem in code that leads to potentially devastating consequences. So it's not terribly surprising, as we need to be able to adapt to these things so that your teams can sleep at night knowing that if something like this happens, they're not going to be up nights and weekends for potentially weeks at a time trying to figure out where they exist in the first place. The 10x one is also a great one because we're talking about productivity of a team, saving time, energy, not wasting energy on false positives, on false or inaccurate data, incomplete data perhaps. That really saves a lot of time. And so the Verizon DBIR report is saying that they contributed to 10x more incidents because of previously unknown things. So if you know about those things in the first place, you are experiencing orders of magnitude increase in productivity for your teams and saving that time and energy. And then lastly, the 50% of companies say they've experienced an attack through an unknown vector. So again, if you know about it, you're half as likely to experience these challenges. And that leads us to what we do at Census. Now, I've already mentioned that we scan the internet. So our internet intelligence platform really powers our attack surface management and search platforms. But really the meat and potatoes of that is we are scanning the entire internet all the time. This multi-perspective scanning and adaptive port scanning powers full visibility across the entire IPv4 space. It is daily refresh, and we are scanning all of the ports in existence on IPv4, not just some of them or a subset of them. And that becomes really, really important, as we'll see in just a moment. Automatic protocol detection enables us to find protocols wherever they are running on whatever port they are running. So you don't have to guess, you don't have to scan, you don't even necessarily have to validate or do probes on your own against what you know about, because we're discovering that for you. And we bundled that in as well with the largest certificate database in existence. It's closing in on, I think, almost 12 billion certificates now and growing every single day. And that basically, these two things get boiled down into the attack surface management or the exposure management platform, which is essentially wrapping all of the search data that's global and saying, hey, AcmeCo, here's your organization, here's what pertains to you, here's what you're going to care about, and the vulnerabilities that you're going to want to close so that you don't end up in the headlines or end up experiencing some of these massive time sucks in the form of a breach or other incident. I love this report here because this really hammers in a lot of the things that I talk about all the time, but it didn't come from me and it didn't come from anything that Census did. This is Gray Noise. They specialize in just some of the general alerts and things like that that happen on the internet. And they released this back in October of this past year. And you really can see on this left-hand side, this chart on the left-hand side is about volume. This at Census being at the top here, you can see that the density across all 65,000 ports, we have coverage on that. And this study was essentially conducted over an 8-day period or week-long period. And you really start to see that for everyone else that is on this list, there are some significant gaps where they're not even looking for anything that's running on any of these ports. And that really becomes problematic as that's probably where attackers are going to try to hide. Or at the very least, non-services that tend to be more problematic for organizations are going to be found. And then on the right-hand side, you can see how we, visually speaking, how Census actually does, in fact, scan with orders of magnitude more volume. That's the refresh cadence. That's how often we're actually scanning and making sure that we're checking to see what all is out there so that we maintain that coverage, we maintain visibility into all of the assets on the entire internet, and then we turn that into something that's helpful for your teams. We also have rapid start programs with our CS. They basically come in, we can create these things without any input from you and really instantaneously get off the ground running and prioritizing where resources need to go. So at the end of the day, this is one of those boulders, right? The visibility that I just described is a giant boulder in the range of things that we need to do for cybersecurity. It's that visibility piece in play. If we don't know what's out there, if we don't know what we're even supposed to be protecting, we can't defend the castle walls from an invasion, whether that's from ransomware, from more targeted attacks. Yes, at the end of the day, one of the big issues is people masquerading as someone else and waltzing in through the castle gates. That's a different issue, that's a different thing, but that doesn't help us if there's a gaping hole in the castle wall that needs to be filled. And that's really what we're doing here, and saving teams time, energy, and resources along the way. This is just a fun visual and example of exactly what we can do. So going back to my first slide, starting to kind of create and define success. It starts with baselining. It starts with that visibility. It starts with being able to know, where are we? Where do we stand? How do we then take this information, pick those big boulders, and start moving the needle? And that's really what this is. This is one example of a snapshot that our customer success team puts together and does on a quarterly basis, typically with most customers, saying, this is what we're doing. This is how your organization is becoming more and more secure over time. These are the changes. These are some of the current events that actually impact that, whether that's new 0 days and mean time to remediation, some of the statistics. And as much as we can also pivot that into dollars saved, which is pretty cool. Now, this is my favorite part of all of this because, again, I love it when independent research comes out that really hammers home what some of the details and things that I share on a regular basis. These are some of the statistics from the Total Economic Impact report that Forrester did independent of us, interviewing our customers. And 70% reduction in false positives, that is huge. How does that translate into time saved and energy wasted? It means that teams are no longer chasing down ghosts, potentially taking minutes, hours, depends on what it is and how quickly it's changing. But it's a massive productivity increase. It's a great way to get into this like modality of continuous improvement. We're scanning everything all the time so that you don't have to, and we're bringing these things to the surface and making sure that they're actionable, intelligible, and making sure that you know what to do with it. 50% reduce in likelihood of a breach. That's a fun statistic. Leave it to you to determine exactly what that means. And the ROI here, of course, is a big one. At the end of the day, anyone leading teams, we're still concerned with the price tag. And no matter how good the tool is, you're sometimes forced to make sacrifices saying, we can go with this kind of inferior solution or direction because it meets my budget, and that's a very real thing. So the more and more that we in the security industry start to speak that language, the better position we're going to be to position to supervisors and the board or whoever is responsible for holding those purse strings. Hey, we're going to see value of this over time. And this one is really big too, right? 0 days are important. They happen, it seems like there was a period of time, especially in like Q1 of this year, where basically once a week we had a new 0 day in some capacity or other. And that's where our team comes into play. We have a research team who is constantly evaluating these things as they drop. And generally speaking, within 24 hours, we now have that specific CVE in our ASM solution or exposure management solution so that we understand exactly where on our perimeter that issue is. You're not spending hours or days or weeks chasing down ghosts, as happened to many organizations when Log4j dropped. And I'm sure many others along the way. That was just one of the more icky ones of the last 2 years. This is absolutely critical. We have to be able to adjust. We have to be able to make sure we course correct in light of the things that are changing. Because if we don't, and we end up leaving these things out there for too long, attackers will find them and they will exploit them. It's important to note that even though we are one of the best known really internet scanner that's out there, circling back to that Green Noise article, one of the things that they touch on is that there are also many out there that are doing scanning of some kind that they don't announce themselves because they're trying to hide who they are and what they are. And that's where we really need to be able to get in there and make sure that we are ahead of those bad actors that are out there. And that's actually my last slide. Hopefully I've kind of pivoted this back to some of the actionability that we see. Habits, going back to the fundamentals, going back to the basics really in security that yields dividends over time. Each tool, each set, each visibility into the cloud, visibility into on-premise devices, visibility into your content delivery networks and the shared resources that are out there online. We are living in a complex world from a cybersecurity state. And what we are doing is enabling your teams to move with greater agility to make sure that they're not having to deal with these major boulder problems at the end of the day. We're moving that needle. We're going back to the basics. We're checking in on our inventory, specifically the inventory that's talking out to the world. And we're doing that every single day so that we know that as things change, how we can quickly pivot and quickly adapt to make sure that we're meeting the business needs, saving money at the end of the day, and also along the same lines, saving our individuals, our teams, time, energy, and avoiding that burnout that can be so significantly costly in so many ways. That's all I had for now. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's session. And Scott, any questions coming in from the audience?
Yeah, and Kevin, just really interesting presentation. And you mentioned flywheel, and 80% of my mental associations around the word flywheel come from Jim Collins' metaphor in Good to Great. But that is such a great book, and I'm glad you called that out because you can't recommend that book highly enough.
One of my faves.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is you were talking about pen tests, and I wonder, how does ASM compare to pen tests? Like, how do they fit together? If you've got ASM, do you still need to do pen tests occasionally? What do you guys recommend? What do you see in sort of your most sophisticated customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. It's really a big one right now because everyone's trying to kind of move into automated pen testing, and there's really a lot of confusion over the attack surface management category as it's been evolving over the last few years. Automated pen testing, I have personal questions on how effective it actually is, because I think that the actual value in pen testing is actually more human driven than in the creative elements that go into the pivoting and the discovery and the exploration aspect of that. So I actually do think that kind of, a quarterly pen testing assessment is still a good thing to do. And the main reason it really is this: since we are focused on scanning the entire internet, we have very broad visibility, but we're not necessarily going as deep as a pen tester will go. And so as long as they are scoped appropriately so that the pen tester has the freedom and flexibility not only to do kind of the footprinting and reconnaissance aspects, that really is kind of this style that we mostly fall into, they're also able to go a little bit deeper and actually prove actual exploit chains. Circling back to Log4j as an example, that's actually a really great example because we, in what we do, we're able to pinpoint kind of where these vulnerabilities existed, but we're not going in and executing code. That's a line that we don't cross because of the volume and the breadth of what we do in our stated intent. That's our flywheel. That's our big differentiator. And so I do think there's a lot of value in it still, but I think it's okay to do it on a quarterly basis. What's not okay is not having the visibility on a faster cadence than that, because a lot of companies are only relying on that as like their sole source of this is what's on our perimeter. And that's what ASM has evolved to maintain, especially as we shifted more to the cloud. We have this scattered IT presence all over the world, both work from home and in relation to where the actual assets are computing and live. We need visibility across all of that. We need something that can give us kind of a single pane of glass we can click into and see at a glance, here's my cloud, here's my on-prem, here's these other assets. And if a configuration change happens, we need to be able to detect that quickly, not days, weeks, months down the road when there's a pen test. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that context. That's really helpful. We've got a question that came in here about your chart and how I mean there was a really amazing chart about census and across all the ports, the scans compared to like Shodan and some of the other tools. Yeah, thanks for bringing that back up.
Yeah.
And I mean it's amazing, and they're just wondering, is there a performance hit from that refresh cadence, or how do you avoid, how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So, quick little background on Census as a company. Our founder is Zakir Jurmovic, and he actually is also the creator of ZMAP, which is one of those open source intelligence tools for scanning the internet at large. And what that tool does really, really well is allows researchers to answer the question, hey, how many computers in the world are broadcasting on port 22 for SSH, for example? But it's single threaded. It doesn't do that well at scale. And early on in the ASM days, it was actually used by a lot of companies to kind of begin to build what became ASM. And now we actually have taken those same underlying technologies. We have a proprietary engine where we're scanning from, I may have called this out, I apologize if I'm repeating myself, 5 different perspectives globally, soon to be 6. And that does a couple of things for us. Number one, our proprietary engine is actually able to do what's most easily thought of as a multi-threaded approach. So we're able to do exponentially more than the ZMAP of the olden days in terms of volume. So there's a lot of compute that goes into that. We've invested a lot of time, energy, money, and engineering resources into maintaining that and making sure that no one really can even come close to us in that regard. That's one of the bigger engines, but the multi-perspective piece also gives us more accurate intelligence into all corners of the world. And all of that gets summed up into this data set that underpins the exposure management and attack surface management platform, where we also enrich with forward reverse DNS lookups, things like that allow us to pinpoint these specific assets owned by organizations.
Yeah, thanks for putting that slide back up there, because that's really striking. Another question that came in here: how does Census help with newly disclosed vulnerabilities?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite points I kind of brought up here towards the end. This is the newly disclosed vulnerabilities piece is absolutely essential. I brought up Log4j previously. What we saw is that those that weren't using us as a customer tended to be scrambling to try to figure out, how does this impact us? And of course, in a scenario like that, that's extremely broad. There's the external impact as well as the internal impact, which does need to be taken into account. But our rapid response team, basically every day, they're out there watching for these new 0 days that drop. And in some cases, we actually get a little bit of an advance notice depending on the disclosure method and things like that of researchers. But they're actually out there doing this work and fingerprinting these things on the internet at large. So they're able to see this fingerprint before it really becomes a problem. And that just gets pulled into our exposure management platform on often like a weekly basis. We're constantly adding to these things. But when something major happens, like a 0 day that impacts customers, within usually about 24 hours, that's already in our solution. And customers are quickly able to identify where on their perimeter they might be impacted by this.
Great. Well, Kevin, we're probably up on time here, but if somebody wants to get started with Census, what do you recommend?
Census is a fantastic solution all around. The attack surface management and exposure management is something you actually have to contact us for, because that has a lot of proprietary sensitive information in it. But if you go to search.census.io, anyone can create a free account, and there's a ton of fun things that you can do with that. We also very recently started to drop our Census GPT, leveraging these large language models to lower that barrier of entry, so you don't have to be as familiar with how kind of database calls and string formatting works in order to go threat hunting throughout the internet. You can just give it plain text English questions. And that link can also be found on the search.census.io page. It's pretty fun, and I'm actually very passionate about this kind of democratization of data that's coming with these LLM solutions, and I'm excited to see where that goes in enabling kind of the next gen of threat hunters out there.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna check that out myself. That sounds really cool. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for being here and bringing us up to date on what Census is up to. Appreciate it.
Okay, and we do have a poll question for you. We appreciate your feedback on additional resources you'd like to see from Census. Meanwhile, if you'd like a quick resource right now, of course, you can head over to the handout section and grab a 2-page PDF about how Census helps defend attack surfaces and hunt for threats. It's got a helpful graphic in there detailing exactly how people in different roles leverage the Census platform. So be sure to check that out if you'd like some more detail. And we can see the responses rolling in here. Thanks to everybody who's responded to the poll and everybody who's about to click. And I'll leave that up there for a second while we do our next prize drawing for our next $300 Amazon gift card. And that one goes to Ken Christensen from Georgia. Okay, and thanks to everybody who's responded to the poll. I'm going to close that down for our grand prize drawing. So we are now giving away a pair of Apple Watch Ultras, one for each of 2 lucky winners. This is the rugged adventure version of the Apple Watch. I'm looking at my sort of comparatively chintzy looking Apple Watch SE here on my wrist and wishing I was in the running for one of these. But our Apple Watch Ultra winners are Lee Myers from Wyoming and Nicole Navasio from Oregon. So congratulations to Ken on the gift card and Lee and Nicole on the watches. We will be in touch about claiming your prizes. And now it's time for our final presentation in the virtual summit. This session comes from Tanium, and presenting for Tanium is Ken Robinson, who is Director of Technical Account Management. Ken, thanks for being here today.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me, and pleasure to speak to all of you here at the Innovation Summit. So
take it away.
Start off with something that, you're the innovation people in process, but I want to start with something a little bit earlier this month, something that was in the journal and other news, and something that I suspect you all need at the end of a long day, which is a little bit of R&R. So in particular, in this case, there's a lawsuit that Raleigh Radiology put against its cyber insurance broker. Now, I'm going to go to this not because remotely Tanium's in the business, nor many of you, in either cyber insurance or, for that matter, ransomware, except as trying to avoid it, but rather for 2 very nifty elements of process for all of us. The first really sad thing about this case was that it was exactly 2 days after the ransomware coverage lapsed that Raleigh Radiology was ransomed so horribly. And then the second one that is relevant to all of us here is that they had outsourced their ransomware coverage to a ransomware broker. And then the whole case lawsuit, which you and I can't go into or solve today, we'll leave that to the American legal system, was that it had allowed the coverage to lapse and somehow hadn't gotten new coverage in place. Now, the reason that I'm keen off of this one, besides the fact that it's pressing in the news and sadly could happen to any of us, the unhappiness of 2 days after your coverage lapsed, it goes poof, you actually get attacked, is that it is impossible for us to predict the future. Oh, we are very good in IT. I've spent my life in this, predicting the past. But we are somehow still just as bad as mankind has always been at predicting the future. And this brings us to the concept of anti-fragility. We don't know. We didn't know. They couldn't know that that was going to be the moment of crisis. And one other element in this, why did the coverage not come in after the one had lapsed and the 2 days before the other? Well, if you, like me, are aware of how ransomware has changed and grown so dramatically, you're aware that cyber insurance companies, losing money on payoffs, have started asking a whole lot more questions before they grant a policy. And poor Raleigh Radiology was in no place to answer some of those questions. If I go for car insurance, the insurance company needs my make and my model and where I live, and that's it. If I go for life insurance, maybe they need a nurse to take a blood test. But when we look at what someone needs to know to secure an IT org, or for that matter, to insure an IT org, what it is that we're going to be asking will change and does change radically. And so we need to be able to respond with agility. We need to be able to answer quickly. So one other thing before we get into IT. I have a picture of something not remotely IT related. I have a picture of the EpiPen that saved my life. Now, what's this come from? I'm allergic to shrimp. I ate some chicken and rice and would have died except for that pen. The concept of software bill of materials is one that was nearly made regulatory by the White House earlier this year and will be later in this year. And it amounts to the impossible challenge of looking at chicken and rice and knowing if there was some shellfish in it. It amounts to taking a look at a cookie without being able to see the process of making it or the ingredients and know what's in it. And to me, this is a beautiful example of the kind of question none of us were asking a year ago or 2 years ago, but suddenly is absolutely crucial for us to answer to the companies that we're suppliers to or the companies that supply us with things. Especially when, of course, in the cyber world where it's not like the cookie was made this morning. DLLs and libraries in all the software we use every day is often something made by a graduate student 10 years ago. So, bringing us now to why I'm here, Tanium, why I'm present on this call, and that is Tanium offers the ability to see every endpoint and control every endpoint across the largest enterprises in seconds. Why are we securing the endpoints in all 5 branches of the DoD or so many of the large banks for so many years? It's that we offer people the ability to instantly ask the question they never knew they would care about now and take action at the same speed and scale. So I am not going to go too much longer on the PowerPoint here, but I'm instead going to flip over and show you some of this live in the environment, show you what it is when you have instant visibility, arbitrary control, and can remediate. And hopefully then carry this forward if this, all right. Can folks see my screen? Are you seeing a web browser at the moment?
I'm seeing it, Ken. Yep, looks good.
Beautiful, beautiful. So when I go back to this one of all too often we've built our processes around tools. I have a little lab here. We've got whatever, I guess you can see, 1,600 machines. And this is, if I take a CISO I was with in the fall, back in November, where he told me, oh, I have somewhere between 400,000 and 700,000 computers. Bear with me for a minute. Think on that for a sentence. Every single sentence that CISO says to his board, or to a cyber insurer for that matter, or to you and I, has to be plus or minus 70%. And it doesn't matter if the question is, what software am I using, or am I vulnerable, or where is this attack? Everything has to be plus or minus. So this is Tanium. I'm going to ask, you can see, it suggested some recent questions here that I ask. If I type, the usual conversion, very nice to what computers could answer. The point here is, this is not coming out of a database. I am touching computers around the globe, containers, systems up in AWS or Azure, and getting answers in this speed. This speed doesn't change regardless of the size of the enterprise. And obviously these questions could be operational questions. How many versions of Adobe do I still have somewhere? Or they could be security questions. That's not the point. The point is I'm a click away from instant information, accurate information on every endpoint. So again, flipping to an example. I was helping a local healthcare conglomerate, actually a hospital chain that I've gone to myself. And we were helping them with something entirely different, server patching. But in there, they mentioned that the average age of their record in ServiceNow, in their CMDB, was 90 days old. We don't ask a pilot to fly an aircraft with 90-day-old weather data. It's absurd to try to secure an enterprise with 90-day-old IT data. So one of the things we did for them was just refresh every single laptop, every server, every VM record with every bit of information they cared about in ServiceNow every single day. Could have been more frequent, but that's not the point. The point was just whatever they cared to have in there was current. And it's wonderful what this did for process. security process or operational process? Because all too often, we've built our processes around a tool rather than build a process about what an organization needs. So let me flip to something entirely different here in this space, which is the sense of, I'll go with my my poor EpiPen, my software bill of materials. So this is an example of one that was pressing for folks last year, Log4j. Think how difficult it was for so many organizations to go find it, because like with the ingredients in the cookie, people didn't know they had Log4j. They just thought they had Splunk. And they weren't aware that nested inside a jar file or an ear file or a WAR file was Log4j. Now, if you think of how often it took organizations months to find every instance of Log4j, I just did it in seconds. Whether it's on a laptop or a server or Linux or Windows, that instant ability to answer a question is magic. Now, if I roll forward here to something that's slightly more current than Log4j, this is the OpenSSL. Anytime you have an OpenSSL. The point isn't the particular. In fact, the particular is backwards. What we're going to care about is not that I have 288 instances tucked away inside a Python library. What we care about is that whatever the problem is, the question is that we're going to desperately need to know about tomorrow, it will be trivially easy to ask and to answer. So I'm going to pause here for a second and put a question back to the audience. And perhaps you're not able to answer at the moment. But I came into IT in '99 to help folks deal with compliance and vulnerability. But why on earth is compliance and vulnerability a completely separate tool? How is it really different than asking a couple hundred questions of every endpoint in a few seconds? Now, your endpoints might be a secure technical implementation guide. They might be a CIS standard for what's a well-configured Windows 10 box. Who cares? Regardless, it's just a variation of ask every endpoint a couple hundred questions and get back the answers in seconds. And again, this is the magic of the modern enterprise. We can't be sitting there saying, I as a person only do, again, compliance, or only do vuln, because that's a tool, here's my tool. An organization needs anti-fragility. It needs flexibility. It needs to be able to move to a completely different direction. And so don't have people be tied into a tool any more than let the software be. I'm showing a vulnerability report. Now, intrinsically, this is just asking every CentOS box and Mac box and Rocky Linux box in my estate 20,000 questions or 40,000 questions to get every single vulnerability. The point here is, don't go have a vulnerability tool, a DLP tool, fill in the blank. For every IT problem, I need another IT tool, a patching tool. If I have the ability to ask any computer anything in seconds, then I can ask it for Print Nightmare. And I think something even niftier in this space, you're never trusting the man behind the curtain, right? Here's the logic. You need to have that exe and those two registry values, or you're vulnerable. But really nifty is this button right here. If you see something, don't email something over to a team. Don't open a ticket. Literally, just click the button, and here's the patch that would close that vulnerability on these 10 systems. Now, again, think past the tool. Think what this means for teams. Instead of, I live my life in a patching tool, and when my organization, when my county, when my company needs some help over in a threat hunting space, I can't help. I'm a patch guy. That's all I do. Instead, when there's a crisis, the gal that normally is dealing with vulnerability can come and help wherever it is, because we're 80% of the way there. We're in the same tool. Now, there's a lot of other things Tanium does. I don't want to belabor all of them, but I want to leave you with this concept. The problems we're going to have to address tomorrow are not the problems that we're thinking about today. Predict the past. What we were all obsessed about 9 months ago, or what we were worried about 3 months ago, didn't turn out to be what was true. What turned out to be true was, in fact, wilder and crazier than that. So this is an example of the capacity to literally search. You saw me searching for a software bill of materials. Every bit of text in every file, every Excel spreadsheet, every PowerPoint. And I've had this help organizations. Right now you're seeing pretty classic things. Look for a HIPAA or look for PCI. But I've had this help in the case of right to be forgotten. If you haven't been hit with a right to be forgotten, in many organizations, privacy rules here, I'll just start search for something safer than right to be forgotten. I'll start yellow. But in many organizations, privacy laws in many states, or obviously in Europe, you can be hit with you must erase every evidence of Jane Doe's name in 72 hours or 42 hours or whatever it happens to be. Those are some pretty challenging requests when it's going to take us, in most organizations, significantly more than that, to find every Word doc where her name is on every laptop. And yet what you're seeing here was I'm 83% of the way searching now every single server or laptop for every instance of the word yellow. I'm going to drop in, and whatever, we'll drop into a couple of these just to show what's involved. The point isn't the particular. The point is we don't know what's going to be crucial to ask and answer, what the board's going to want to know, or what that cyber insurer is going to want to know. But we know we'll be able to answer it 6 months from now, or whenever the crisis comes up. So whatever, here's 68 items where I had the word yellow. And okay, this one's just a printer. So details about there's 100 characters before it said yellow and 100 characters after. Again, roll in your mind here if this was something more critical. So yellow shows up in, War of the Worlds. There's 100 characters before yellow, 100 characters after. All this, of course, is wrapped in a very mature role-based access control. So we're not in a situation where we are ourselves exposing data. And something I really love about this, very important for use in Europe or privacy-centric ones, the data is not brought centrally. The data remains on all those laptop servers until and when there's an incident and an actual incident responder with appropriate permissions needs to reach out there. Again, absolutely love that take advantage of in the modern world, the modern endpoint has storage compute. Minimize what's brought centrally until there's a need or a crisis, and leave it on the endpoint where you can have far richer logging without impact to our corporate network or corporate endpoint. So I know this has been a little bit of a quick romp through the product, but I'd want to circle back to saying we, as an IT industry, have not served IT by saying for every problem, buy another tool. For every crisis, buy another product. In the global economic pressure that we all face, that's not feasible anyway. But broader than that, it's not helping IT to be, okay, here's this year's problem. There'll be a whole bunch more things at RSA that want to burden your endpoint, burden your network, need their own servers, need their own cloud instances. The capacity, yeah, I'll just drop into one more of these as we wrap up here. But the idea that, okay, there has been a change with quantum computing, and an awful lot of certificates that used to be adequate are not going to be adequate anymore. How, my little teeny lab of 1,000, I have 433,000 certificates that this little client has now inventoried on me. And again, you could look at this from, as I do, a security angle, right? Who is going to be crackable now? Who's no longer a secure certificate by strength? Or you could look at it from an operations perspective. What certificates are expiring in the next 7 days or 30 days? Let's do something before there's a crisis. The point isn't the particular, sure, who's the certificate issuer? Let's drop into one of these. Certs in 30 days. The point is that whatever data will be critical for us to know, it will be accessible to us. And whatever change we need to make, we'll be able to do. Not just now, but that unpredictable future. The things we're going to care about in the near future. So here's my expired cert and what port he's listening on and where he happens to be. The point is that flexibility. Our teams are no longer locked into by tools, and the things we can't anticipate, we know we will be able to address in the moment. So I think, in the interest of time, Paul, are we heading to Q&A at this point?
Yeah, let's do Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and stop your screen share.
Stop my share here. Perfect.
Yep, super. And I'm also going to pop up the poll, just for additional information people would like about the Tanium solution. Now, Ken, that was an awesome demo, and I have some questions for you right off the bat before I even start asking all these audience questions. So my first one is, how are the query responses so fast? I think about like my Windows 11 search bar takes way longer than that to search locally, and you're pulling all this information. Is it scraped and cached? I mean, how do you do that?
So that is where a lot of our patents and secret sauce lie, where we spent the 10 years of experimenting on the very largest and toughest financial networks, was building a linear chain architecture that allows millions, tens of millions in this world of containers and cloud to answer in seconds. Definitely something I'd want to go a little further in a personal detail, or obviously we have white papers and whatnot around it. But that really is the heart of the magic. There is that linear chain technology to allow that instant answering. There are also things we do, for example, compared to your Win 10 one there, of caching on the endpoint itself, not on the network, not centrally, but caching is the wrong term, indexing the endpoint so that we can quickly access the parts that are relevant to you. Indexing is the right way to put that.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Yeah. So I guess without getting into secret sauce, just from my standpoint as somebody who would be, administering this system, is the console web-based or does it run on the server?
Yes, the console is itself completely web-based. By far the most common format today is to be Tanium Cloud, Tanium as a service. So that's the most common way it's consumed. There are still organizations that have Tanium as appliances on-premise or whatnot. But that also brings up a great point, that the web UI is actually just a front end for an API. Everything's an API call. Everything you saw me click today is an API call. So plenty of folks don't use our web console at all to make nouns or ask questions.
Gotcha. And that actually gets into Sivaraj's question about are there APIs for Taniums? Thanks for the question. Also, so as far as that indexing goes, do I need to load agents onto all these endpoints, or is it agent?
Yes, Tanium is an agent-based technology. You can't be as rich or as flexible of the data we're gathering without being on the endpoints. And generally speaking, that's one of our greatest advantages. Usually when people deploy Tanium, they're pulling at least 4 existing agents off that, this did, again, one function. Maybe this did vulnerability assessment on Linux, or this one did patching on Windows, or this tool was, fill in the blank. I've had people retire as many as 20 different client-side agents with their Tanium deployments.
Okay, very cool. Another question from Sivaraj about can Tanium get details from machines with old OS versions? He has the example of Microsoft 2003.
So there is a point beyond which we don't go, and that's we do have some very old ones in there. Solaris and AIX are still present, but you can get far enough, we no longer support Windows 2003, for example, and certainly not in our cloud instances. So we'll tell you about it from the agents that are present. The neighborhood watch will tell you there's a Windows 2003 box a couple IPs up, but we won't install on agents after a certain point out of their extended support.
Yeah, makes sense. Question from Jeffrey: does Tanium give an overview of the installed apps on an end user's end user's device, like a single device?
So yes, it does. Obviously, I showed every application on every organization or computer in the organization, but you have a single endpoint view, or you could just, so that would be exactly what you described, or you could filter. Hey, I just care about this business unit. I don't care about my larger organization. I care about the sheriff's department. I could care less what's present in county health, et cetera.
Another architectural question, what database stores all this information?
That is a beautiful question. There isn't one. We couldn't give you the kind of response you saw across million-plus node estates in seconds on any database, no matter however optimized. So we're actually querying the endpoints for data, and what data is present, like cache data, is sitting in RAM on the Tanium server itself.
All right, great. Last question here is a costing question. They're asking, with the global recession, I need to cost below what I spent last year. How can I think of adding tools?
Yes, so that's I appreciate the question here. But why has Tanium done very well in this downturn, and indeed in other downturns of the places? Because when times were fat, for lack of a better term, people could just buy every shiny tool. When you need, as we do today, to find a way to reduce the IT spend and hopefully keep as many of the great IT professionals that we know we are going to need in a crisis, then it's very common to be, well, maybe some point solution tool had 2 neat features that were awesome, but we never used. And instead, we need to retire 4, 6, 7 of these point solution tools that, it just did, fill in the blank here, Linux DLP, or it just did Windows patching. Retire those, remove the servers, remove the training associated with them, and have a single platform that can ask a question everywhere and take arbitrary action.
Okay. No, great stuff. So, Ken, I think that's about we're about up on time. But if somebody wants to get started with Tanium, any recommendations?
Sure. So right on the Tanium website, tanium.com, we have a beautiful Tanium risk assessment that you can sign up for, download the clients, get them on a representative extent of your computers, and start to see for yourself the data that you do see from your endpoints. You do see from your endpoints. So I would really start with that one, tanium.com. It also, of course, has some very beautiful white papers and case studies of organizations over the past years and how they've transformed the process and people of IT by getting out of the point solutions and onto instant accurate data.
Very nice. All right. Well, Ken, thanks for a great demo and really interesting presentation. Really appreciate the update on Tanium.
Thank you.
Okay, and thanks to everybody who has answered the poll question. And by the way, in your handout section, there's a link to that tanium.com homepage where you can find that risk assessment that Ken was just talking about. So I'd highly recommend clicking on that. And now it is time for our final set of prize drawings for the day. The winner of the last $300 Amazon gift card is Holden Gable from Nebraska. And our next set of grand prizes are Surface Pro 9s, Microsoft Surface Pro 9s. And it says here win one of 2, but we've actually got 3. We've got 3 to give away. So our 3 winners are Justin Buckley in California, Mike Taggart in Indiana, and our bonus winner, I guess, is Jonathan Weaver in Colorado. So congratulations to Holden on the gift card, and to Justin, Mike, and Jonathan on the Microsoft Surface Pro 9s. And of course, if you've been asking questions during the event, during the sessions, there's still an opportunity to win a $50 gift prize, one of those for each of the 4 sessions. Again, we'll take a look at all the questions that came in afterward and get back to the winner from those. And if you were watching the event today and thinking that this type of event would be the ideal platform to tell folks about your platform or solution, we'd love to hear from you to help you determine which of our hundreds of events each year would be a good fit for you. So you can contact us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And I'd also like to point out that we've got another great event coming up shortly on Tuesday. That's June 6th. We have an EcoCast about securing, backing up, and optimizing Kubernetes. So check that out. It should be a great session. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I just want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together such great presentations and demos and Q&A insights. I also want to thank all of our participants for making this event possible. And finally, But not least of all, of course, we'd like to thank you all for attending today's virtual summit from Actual Tech Media and for all of your great questions during each of the sessions. So that concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.